So everybody says Happy New Year and wishes others a Happy New Year. The best way to have a Happy New Year is to generate bodhicitta. So we need to think about that. What is our idea of a good New Year? It usually centers around getting what we want, having the situations we want, being comfortable, being our version of success, and so on. So our version of a good New Year is the external world cooperating with our internal self-centeredness. The external world, unfortunately, is not set up like that. But when we cultivate bodhicitta, then anywhere we go, whoever we're with, whatever is happening, our mind can be happy. And even more important than our own happiness is our life becomes meaningful. Because we're practicing the path to full awakening, and because our actions are directed towards being of benefit to other living beings. So take a moment and think about that and what your version of a Happy New Year is, and try and change your mind into one that wants to generate bodhicitta and act with love and compassion towards all other sentient beings equally. Okay, so there were several questions that I will try to answer. Okay, so the first one is, well, how do you deal with guilt and shame and get rid of them? Yeah, because yesterday we talked about the difference between genuine regret, which is, seeing we made a mistake and and feeling regret for it, and not wanting to experience the unpleasant results from that, and guilt, which is going round and round about how bad I am, making ourselves the star of the show, and shame, thinking that we are defective goods from the very get-go and there's nothing to do about it. Okay, so how do we deal with those latter two? Because they're definitely things to abandon on the path. Yeah, you cannot imagine. Just think about it for a while. Think about the qualities of a Buddha. Do you think a Buddha starts to feel guilty and has so much self-recrimination? 50 million, now Buddha's omniscient. I can remember everything from previous lives. Oh, I feel so terrible. 50 million eons ago, I mistreated my parents. What a terrible person I am. How could I ever have become a Buddha? And then going round and around and around like that. Yeah, can you imagine a Buddha thinking like that? Yeah. Buddha wouldn't have any time to benefit any sentient beings because all those Buddhas would be so self-absorbed about how terrible they are and, with their lowest self-esteem. Yeah. What about shame? Do you think Buddhas feel like they're defective goods from the get-go. Oh, I attained Buddhahood, but I'm worse than those sentient beings. Something's fundamentally wrong with me. Yeah? I mean, you think about it, it's ridiculous. So that helps us to see that those attitudes are not things to cultivate on the path. They do not diminish our sense of feeling bad for what we did. They do not atone for our mistakes. They just get us stuck. Okay? So we've got to recognize those things. And then there's two things I do with it. One is, what I think is helpful, is write down the things that you're saying to yourself. When you're guilty, write down all those self-recriminating remarks. When you feel shame, write down the whole case about why you are defective from the get-go. Yeah, write it down. You're thinking it all the time, so write it down, okay? Then look at it and ask yourself, take, your guilty things or your shameful things, you can, whichever you choose. And one by one, ask yourself, is this true? Okay? Is this true? So you feel guilty. Yeah. How could I have done that? I am so inconsiderate. Everything I do is just self-centered. I'm so bad. Okay, now you wrote that down. Okay, now look at it. Is that true? Everything you do is self-centered? Everything you do is so bad? Every single thing you do every moment? Yeah, come on. That's not true. So are you lying to yourself? Okay, so all this self-talk, all this rumination is basically a bunch of lies. Okay? So if there's lies, then you expose them as lies. You toss them out. They're conspiracy theories. They're fake news. If you start believing your own conspiracy theories, then you might as well go join, Alex Jones on InfoWars and spew all your own self-hatred out on the radio like he does. Yeah? Okay. If you look at the stuff that you wrote down for why you're defective goods. Yeah. Oh, I was born to this family who has these disadvantages, da-da-da-da-da. And even if I were born to a good family, still I'm totally incapable. I went to school and I still couldn't remember anything, I never learned anything. I'm so stupid from the very beginning. Really? You never learned anything? You learned how to talk. Yeah. You got potty trained. Yeah. You learned. You're intelligent. Okay. And remember that one disciple of the Buddha, the one who really had trouble learning, and the Buddha had him sweep the courtyard for the monks. And while he was sweeping, he was supposed to say, remove the dirt, remove the stain. Yeah, while he was clearing the dirt. And eventually he began to realize the dirt was the afflictive obscurations, the stain were the cognitive obscurations, and he began to abandon them and became an arhat. Okay, so remember things like that. Okay? And so don't sit there really and get into all these self-centered conspiracy theories. Really, because that's what they are. Yeah. And, you look at them very clearly. Is what I'm thinking true or not true? Yeah. And Bodhisattva said, it is true. Nobody loves me. Really? Come on. Nobody loves you. Your parents loved you. Oh, but they weren't around when I was growing up. But they still loved you. All parents loved their kids. Oh, but they didn't treat me properly when I was growing up. That doesn't mean they didn't love you. Yeah, parents have all their own problems. They do their best. Loving someone doesn't mean everything you do makes them happy. Yeah. Our parents, they're ordinary sentient beings, and they mess up, and they're doing the best they can. They don't love me. Do you love them? Are you kind to them? Are you forgiving to them? Okay? We have to look at what's going on inside here instead of always lamenting about everybody else. Okay? Why? Because we cannot control anybody else's mind. We can barely control our own. Yeah, and so that's what we have to work on. Okay? So that's one thing that I do, is I just sit there and go through everything. Is this true or not true? And sometimes when you're doing it, at least me, I start laughing because some of the self-talk is so ridiculous that it's funny. Yeah, it's really funny, and you have to laugh at yourself. Okay? Then the other thing I do, which is helpful, and I start feeling guilty or all the self-recrimination or whatever. Okay. Then I think, okay, there's a wisdom me, and then there's the self-recrimination me, the guilty me or shameful me or whatever. And they have a discussion. Yeah. And the wisdom me says, okay, what are you really trying to say? Huh? When you start this whole discourse about how you can't do anything right or how you're defective goods or whatever, what are you really trying to say? And then, the guilty, shameful one, because I'm both parties in this discussion. So then I have to think, what is it I'm really trying to say? Yeah. When I get into this whole, drama of self-recrimination, what am I really trying to say? Yeah. And you dig and you dig and you dig because it isn't always immediately apparent what you're really trying to say. Yeah. What I've found is what I'm really trying to say is I want somebody to love me. Because if somebody else loves me, it means I'm good. And the wisdom of me says, yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But how is somebody else loving you going to disperse all of that self-hatred? Because if you don't believe in yourself, why are you going to believe what other people say about you? And then the self-recrimination me has to sit and think some more. Yeah. And it envisions the whole wide world praising me and telling me how wonderful I am. Finally, the world loves me. I am appreciated. That makes me a good person. But then you watch that, and you begin to see, actually, when other people tell me how wonderful I am, deep down inside, I don't quite believe it. Yeah, I always need more. I need more love. I need more appreciation. More. Yeah. And then the wisdom me says, you're getting somewhere. So what do you think the real issue is? What is it you really need to do? And then the self-recrimination, self-hatred one says, maybe I need to like myself. Oh, but I can't like myself because I'm really so awful. Well, we went through that again before, Yeah, don't rerun it. We already went through that, and you saw that that's, InfoWar material. So what do you really need to do? And then you dig and you dig. You really get that part of yourself to look. And sometimes you give it a little hint, and finally it says, actually, I need to accept myself. How can I accept myself when I'm so terrible? Oh, come on. Just shut up already. Okay. You need to learn to evaluate your own mental states, your own actions. Because if you can evaluate them, then you're not going to depend on other people to tell you you're good. And if you evaluate things and you see, oh, I had a good motivation and I did my best, then pat yourself on the back. That's good. If you see that you had a bad motivation, do the 4 opponent powers, purify it. Yeah? Accept that you made a mistake. It is really, believe me, not the end of the world that you made a mistake. Yeah? If it were the end of the world every time I made a mistake, the world would not be here. It would have, been long gone. So you have this little kind of dialogue with yourself in your meditation. Yeah? And you really challenge those thoughts. Don't just accept them, but challenge them. And, are they true? What really is the correct way to think in this situation? Okay, so try that. Sometimes we did something and we're not quite sure, was it virtuous or non-virtuous? Okay, so sometimes I've seen with myself, some things I can't figure out until much later, sometimes even years later, if my action was okay or not. One thing that lets me know, is there somewhere inside of me an uncomfortable feeling? If there's some kind of uncomfortable feeling inside, then I really need to look more closely at my motivation. Yeah. And I also need to look more closely at my expectations, because sometimes I may have a good motivation, but I don't have the skill to carry it out. And I mean well, but the situation becomes pretty messy because my actions were unskillful. Okay? That does not mean I'm a bad person. It means that there's an opportunity to learn. Okay? So how else could I have acted in that situation? And sometimes what I find helpful to do, if I can't figure out any other way to act, or I get very confused, it's like, okay, it was wrong for me to get angry and blast that person, but what am I supposed to do? Just crumble and let them walk all over me? You get into this black and white way of thinking, and it's like, okay, it doesn't have to be so dualistic like that. What are other options? And how else could I have acted? And then I think, okay, if Chenrezig were there in that situation, or if Vajrasattva was there in that situation, how would Vajrasattva have looked at the situation? I don't start out with how would Bodhisattva have acted. Action comes later. How would Vajrasattva have looked at that situation? Would Vajrasattva have been angry? I don't think so. But somebody did something really mean and cruel. So shouldn't I be angry? Shouldn't Vajrasattva be angry? If Vajrasattva were angry, then he'd be just like us. Yeah? So no, Vajrasattva wasn't angry. How then did Vajrasattva look at that situation? How would he look at somebody being cruel like that? And you have to sit and think, really, how would a Buddha look at the situation? And to think about that, you have to remember Untitled Chapter 6. You have to remember the qualities of the Buddha. You have to remember the mind training teachings. Okay? So you have to, call up the teachings that you've heard. The ones that you put in your notebook or typed in your computer and then never looked at again. You have to go back and look at them. Yeah. Better yet, before you pack up your computer, you have to look at them and think about them some more so that you'll remember them later when you need them. Okay? So in this way, you really work with your mind. And slowly, your mind learns to look at things in a more realistic way, in a more beneficial way. Okay? But you got to do the work to make that happen. And that entails time, and it entails energy and commitment on our part. And sometimes we'll forget and we'll mess up. Okay? That doesn't mean we're bad and we have to fall into self-hatred. You just go back and do what you need to do and start the process over and, do that. Okay, so what's the best way to reform or restore the relationship when the person has died? Restoring the relationship in terms of the four opponent powers, the central factor in that is the change in our mind. Okay? Because we're creating the relationship. Yeah. So it's not so much even you can go and apologize to the person if they're alive. If they've died, you can imagine apologizing to them. But the main thing is the change in our own mind. Yeah. Because as long as we hold rancor towards somebody, it doesn't matter whether they're alive or not, we're suffering from anger. So the real thing is to begin to let go of our anger in a situation. Now the thing is that we've been taught, and I think there's probably an innate element in this too, to think that when somebody has harmed us, or when we think or project that somebody has harmed us, we don't know if they've really harmed us, but we think they have, there's the thought that I have every right to be mad, and that any sane person would be angry about this. And if I'm not angry, then something's wrong with me. Okay, my therapist even told me that. I've heard people say that. Yeah. So, no, that's not really the issue. The thing is, do I understand that person? Do I recognize that that person is a sentient being just like me, who wants happiness and doesn't want to suffer, who has afflictions in their mind, and whose afflictions came pouring out, and the object just happened to be me? And when afflictions pour out from somebody's mind, usually the person is saying more about themselves. They're really saying, I'm suffering, I'm unhappy, I'm confused. We just happen to be the object there that they put it all on. But we don't see it that way. We take it personally. That person is criticizing me. How dare they? And I've got to defend myself, and I'm angry, and I want retaliation. Well, actually, it's not so polite to say I want to retaliate, but I want them to know how bad I feel and feel some regret. Or maybe they feel guilty or shameful. Okay. Now, when we have that kind of internal thing going on, does what the other person did to us really matter? Yeah. It doesn't, because what they did to us is not happening now. We are rerunning the video again and again of what they did to us, embellishing it a little bit here and a little bit there, and imputing more and more motivation onto them. Mm-hmm. Okay, so who's suffering? Yeah. Again, doesn't matter they're alive or they're dead. Who's suffering when I'm holding rancor? They're not suffering. Maybe they've died. Maybe they're lying on the beach. Yeah, maybe your ex is out falling in love with somebody new. How dare they do that? As long as you think that, who's suffering? Yeah, they're not suffering. We're suffering. Who does anger hurt more? The other person or us? Yeah, it hurts us, doesn't it, when we hold anger? Because we're just stuck, we're trapped, we're chained by the anger. And so the restoring of the relationship is my letting go of my anger so that I can look at that person and see they're a sentient being just like me who wants happiness and doesn't want suffering. His Holiness says that almost every teaching he gives. Okay? He says that. And it's really true. And we keep forgetting it, so he keeps having to say it to remind us. Okay? That person isn't evil. They're confused. They're suffering. They're in pain. Okay? So that leads into the next question, which is, please discuss the relationship of forgiveness to the four opponent powers. And somebody said, it's said that there's no good word in Tibetan for forgiveness, with little practical difference from patience and tolerance. Now, I've never heard that before. Yeah, my Tibetan is not good enough to know if there's a word in Tibetan for forgiveness. His Holiness uses the English word forgiveness a lot. A lot. He talks, that comes in almost every teaching he mentions too. Okay. So a saying attributed to the Buddha is, I cannot forgive you because I have no grudge against you. Again, I've never heard that, but it sounds good. If I don't have a grudge against you, then there's nothing for me to forgive. Okay. It has been said that forgiveness is not a part of Buddhism. Who said that? I've never heard of any of these things. Have any of you? I've never heard of forgiveness being seen like that in Buddhism. Never. Okay? So, when I talk about forgiveness, what I mean is letting go of our rancor, our anger, our wish for revenge, our belligerence, our want to give that person a taste of their own medicine. Okay? Forgiveness is not something we give to the other person. Forgiveness is something we do for ourselves by putting down our anger. Okay? So the idea of forgiveness in the West is sometimes very mixed up. We feel like the person who's been harmed has power to bestow forgiveness. And they can choose to bestow forgiveness or withhold forgiveness. Yeah. That's not exactly the way the whole thing is seen in Buddhism. Although we do have in the Bodhisattva vows, part of the Bodhisattva vows, is if somebody comes to us and apologizes and expresses regret, we are to accept their apology and not rub it in and not castigate and chastise them more, okay? Yeah, so that is definitely in the Bodhisattva vows. But forgiveness is really something that is our business to let go of our own anger, because we're the ones who are suffering when we're angry. Okay, the other person may not be suffering. In fact, have you ever had a situation where people have apologized to you and you're going, what are you talking about? Yeah, I don't see anything that happened why you have to apologize. But the other person is saying, please forgive me. And you feel, I didn't even see any mistake to start with. Okay. Apologizing is very good. It's very healthy. We need to apologize. Because apologizing, again, from our side means that we have that opponent power of regret. Not guilt and not shame, but we have regret. When we have regret, we want to apologize to the other person. If they're alive, if they're not alive, we can just visualize them and apologize. But the main thing is that we feel regret. And then we go on with the purification process. Yeah. But forgiving is very much our process, and we're the beneficiary. Yeah. When we forgive somebody, it doesn't really do much for the other person. Yeah. Somebody who apologizes may want to know that we've accepted the apology. And that's important. And that's why there's a Bodhisattva precept about that, to accept apologies. Okay? So, yeah. I've seen some instances of forgiveness that have been very, very powerful. Yeah. So one of our friends who comes to the Abbey a lot, her brother was a police officer, I believe, and was shot by somebody in the line of duty. And right near his spine, it like almost permanently disabled him. And he spent, and his wife spent, a good chunk of time being very hateful towards it was a young person who shot. And at a certain point, they decided that they needed to let go of their anger. And they went, first it was the husband, the wife was still mad about it. But the husband, the one who was shot, made contact with the young man who had shot him. And a relationship began from there. And eventually the wife joined in. They went to see the young man. And they actually became friends. And the man eventually got released from prison. They spoke up for his release. And he's now, I think, one of the essential workers in San Francisco. Okay? And so it's one of these stories where you see somebody, well, two people, both the man and the woman, could have been embroiled in hatred for years and years and years until the end of their life. And who's suffering then? Yeah. But by forgiving the person and putting down their anger, yeah, and really going and trying to get to know him and see what was going on and trying to help, I mean, the whole situation got turned around for all three people. Mm-hmm. If you find that you get stuck in forgiving and your mind keeps on saying, well, yes, I should forgive, but they did this and this and this and this and this. And they promised to do this and this. We were married and it was part of the marriage vows that they would do this and this and this. And they broke the marriage vows. And how could they have done this? And this betrayed me and I'm so angry and I'm so hurt. And I want revenge. So this person that you love so dearly, now you can't stand with all your guts. What's going on there? Did you really love them to start with? Did you really care about them, or did you really just care about yourself? And if somebody's nice to you, you say you love them, and if they're mean to you, then you can't stand them. Is that what love means? That's what love means on the radio and in the movies. That's not what love means in Buddhism. Okay, what love means in Buddhism is you want somebody to have happiness and the causes of happiness. And it doesn't mean romantic love. Yeah. It means there's a sentient being like me who wants happiness and not suffering. And I want them to have happiness and the causes of happiness and to be free of whatever is making them suffer. And so yes, I can wish them to be free of the external conditions that make them suffer. But I also want them to be free of the mind of anger and self-pity and vengeance that make them suffer. Okay? So really, working on ourselves, because it all boils down to the fact that our mind creates our happiness and our misery. Okay? So blaming other people really doesn't help much. I mean, you look at Trump's situation. He spent 4 years twittering, spewing hatred out to other people. And is he any happier for it? Yeah, is that one happy person in the White House who's soon to be out of the White House? Yeah, this is somebody who's extremely unhappy. And all the revenge hasn't gotten him anywhere. And it's impacted a lot of other people in a negative way and created a lot of negative karma that he will experience the result of in future lives. So what's there to hate? So we should learn, instead of having to become vengeful and spew our anger out at everybody else, we should look at his situation and see how that doesn't work at all. And then not suppress our anger. I'm not talking about suppressing it, but, practicing the mind training teachings, practicing chapter 6 of Bodhicharyavatara, and learning to let go of stuff. Mm-hmm. Okay. So how does this relate? How do forgiveness, apology, and so forth relate to the 4 opponent powers? Well, you can see that having regret, then we want to apologize. Okay? Restoring the relationship, we have to forgive and set down our anger. Then remedial action is showing that we really mean it. Okay? And doing something virtuous. And then making a determination not to do it again is understanding how our mind got so twisted up in the afflictions and familiarizing ourselves with the antidotes so that next time a similar situation happens, we remember the antidotes and apply them right away instead of going round and around in circles being miserable. Mm-hmm. Okay. Then, next question. These are all very good questions, that actually need to be talked about as part of the teaching anyway. Okay, so please explain the mental factor of, it's translated as shame or moral self-dignity. Okay. So I remember studying the virtuous mental factors, and there's one that says shame. And I'm going, how is that virtuous? Okay. Well, there's 2 meanings of shame. I talked about that yesterday. There's the shame that I'm defective goods, and then there's the shame that means I know I can do better. However, since most people nowadays think of shame in the self-hatred kind of defective goods ways, although I did hear something, I did hear a proper use of the word shame recently. There was one former senator who was talking about the latest conspiracy theory that some group of Republicans are going to act on in a few days. And he said, what these people are doing is shameful. And there, what he meant was a good kind of shame. In other words, you people know what you're doing is not going to bring a good result. You know what you're saying is not true. So why are you doing this and messing everybody up? That's what he said. And that's why he said, that is shameful. Because those people know they're not stupid people. Yeah. So that was a good use of the word. However, since so often that word comes to mean defective, and, I feel, you hear when you're a kid, you should feel ashamed of yourself. Yeah, you didn't eat all your broccoli and children are starving in China. Okay, so some of us, I don't know, the younger generation, did you hear that? Oh, I thought you were too young to hear that. Oh, you heard that. Oh, yeah, really? It was Africa, not China. Okay, so it changed countries. Yeah, but you should eat your broccoli. That is your salvation from being permanently defective. Yeah, that's what it comes out as. So, yeah. Or remember, what was it, Popeye and his spinach. Yeah. I don't think the younger ones, you don't know Popeye, do you? Really? Popeye lived that long? Yeah? I had no idea. I thought Popeye got old like my generation. No? Okay. So that's why you eat your spinach at the Abbey. Okay. So actually, that mental factor, nunsa, I translate it as a sense of integrity rather than shame. Okay? Because the meaning of that virtuous mental factor is that you have a sense of your own values and principles. You have a sense of your own religious practice and the kind of person you want to be. And you didn't act according to that. You messed up. Happens to all of us. Okay? So that is a virtuous mental factor because, we have a sense of the kind of person we want to be and the kind of values and principles we hold. Yeah? So when that virtuous mental factor is present, it acts as a strong deterrent for getting involved in negativity and harming others and harming ourselves. Okay? So translating it as shame, I think, is way, way, way too confusing. I think my guess what happened is that a young Tibetan who's learning English had an old dictionary, old Tibetan English dictionary, and they looked up that word, and because the word used to mean very much, kind of like, you can do better, and said, oh, that word, nutsa, means shame, and translated it as shame without anybody at present explaining what that word actually means to people in the modern age. That may be what happened. Yeah, there's a number of translations that have somehow stuck on for years and years, and I think that's how they came. Like there's one translation of wrong views as heresy. I remember my first Dharma course where my teacher started, Yeah, and the 10th non-virtue is heresy. And like there's Joan of Arc burning at the stake. Yeah. And is that what's going to happen to me if I become a Buddhist? I'm going to be the Buddhist Joan of Arc, because I'm going to hell for having heresy. That's completely not the meaning of the word, okay? It's wrong views or distorted views, okay? Why are distorted views or wrong views considered negative? Because they take us down the slippery slope. Yeah, you're following the new expression now as you're jumping into the rabbit hole. Okay, with all your conspiracy theories, with all your fake news. And that's what's happening. Okay, so wrong views, it's not like there's Buddhism and Buddhist catechism, and you've got to believe this and this and this and this and that, and certify that you are a card-carrying Buddhist who will never defect from those principles, because the result is you go to hell with a capital H. And there's 8 hot hells and 8 cold hells, and there's the intermediate hells. And, you don't need to read Dante. You can read, in specific, Pabonka Rinpoche. Yeah, Jay Rinpoche doesn't go into a lot of this. Pabonka Rinpoche, and he will give you all the details, okay? So this is our taking Christian upbringing and imputing it on Buddhism, okay? The word does not mean heresy, yeah? And we're not expected to just accept everything with blind belief. This is a third thing His Holiness says. If you've been following His Holiness's teachings recently, there's a few things he says every single time. And this is another one. Yeah, as Buddhists, we do not believe in blind faith. Okay, we do not follow things blindly. The Buddha himself told us to question, told us to investigate. Okay, and then he gives the quote about just as somebody who's going to buy gold, rubs it and cuts it and burns it. In other words, you really test the material to see if it's really gold. You don't just, kind of say, well, it looks good enough. Yeah, you test it. So the same way we're supposed to do with the teachings. And we're allowed intellectual freedom to really challenge the teachings. Okay? Because we're not going to become a Buddha by becoming a card-carrying Buddhist and stuffing our wisdom and just being somebody who has great faith in whatever we hear. That's not how you become a Buddha. Okay? You become a Buddha by developing wisdom. Wisdom means you have to think about and question and investigate and apply it to your own mind. It doesn't just mean, oh, my teacher said it, it must be true. His Holiness does not follow that. There are some teachers who really emphasize faith, okay? His Holiness is not one of them like that, yeah. Although he says, when he gives tantric initiation, he says, in the text it says you have to view the guru as Vajradhara. So this is one case where you better follow what the text says, okay? Yeah, but that's at highest class Tantra, which is a very high practice that you take after you've done all this other questioning and the whole Sutrayana practice. Okay? But what I think, I know I'm off on a tangent, but that's how I think heresy got put in some books is somebody just looked up the Tibetan word in an old dictionary and said, well, it must mean that. And then we impute all of our Christian stuff on it. Okay, so I'm all for retranslating that virtuous mental factor and making it integrity. It's not shame. It is coupled with another virtuous mental factor that is also difficult to translate. Some people translate it as embarrassment. Again, that I think that one must have been looked up in the dictionary too. But it more is consideration for others. And it's parallel to integrity. Because with integrity, we have respect for ourselves and respect for our spiritual practice. With consideration for others, we respect others and we respect their spiritual capabilities and their good kind of faith, the faith that comes with conviction. We respect that and we don't want to destroy their relationship with the Dharma through our bad behavior. Okay, so that's why I think it's better to translate that as what did I say? Consideration for others. Although I read recently another translation as decency. Yeah, you're being a decent person. You're not messing up other people's minds. Yeah, with your own bad behavior. So that could be a good translation too. Embarrassment. When I think of embarrassment, I think of all the things that I was taught as how I'm supposed to be as a young lady. And if I don't do that, then I should be embarrassed. Throw that out the window. Yeah. How much misogynistic garbage were we taught when we were young? Yeah. So, So these two mental factors, you can see why they're virtuous. Yeah. And you can see how they fit in to the four opponent powers and to the Vajrasattva practice. Because when we're doing the fourth opponent power at the end of the practice and making a determination to avoid the bad behavior in the future, what we're doing is we're trying to make these two mental factors strong. I respect myself. I respect my own principles and values. I want to act according to them. And that's what I'm really determining to do in the future. And with that, I will abandon this behavior, which I'm regretting, or I really respect others. I don't want to mess up their minds with my bad actions of body, speech, and mind. Yeah. So I really want to be considerate of them and their spiritual practice, and be a positive influence on them that leads them to create virtue. Yeah. And so that's your sense of decency or consideration for others, and you're reinforcing that when you have the fourth opponent power.
I heard if the word heretic is just like the word heresy is a bad translation. The word heretic, would you also not use that word?
Oh, definitely. If heresy is a ridiculous translation, heretic is the same verbal root, definitely.
Someone online is asking, can virtuous things like fortitude, bodhicitta, ethical conduct, and so on purify negativities, or is it just practices that involve the four opponent powers?
Though generating those virtuous mental activities are, or attitudes, are part of the four opponent powers. Okay? So they definitely create virtue. They definitely help to purify. Yeah? But there's something about the four opponent powers where it's not just generating virtuous mental factors. It's when you do the remedial behavior, you have to put some energy into doing something. Okay? So that has a little bit more force. It could be even sitting still and doing meditation on emptiness or on Tonglen, which, you would generate the virtuous mental factors before you did that kind of thing.
How would you answer a question? There are some Jewish people, or have been, if they're still alive, then yes, who can't forgive, or like Greta Thunberg, who says, what you're doing right now with the environment, we will not forgive you. So when such reply comes towards you, how would you reply? I mean, for non-Buddhist, I guess.
Okay, so when some climate activists say, you're messing up our world,
for example, or Jewish people who have suffered in Nazi Germany in concentration camps and don't forgive.
Okay, so Jewish people have said we're never going to forgive what happened, or climate people say we're never going to forgive, what you're doing. I think that's, it's different. I think in the case of the climate people, they're trying to make the other people feel guilty. In the case of Jews saying we're not going to forgive, I think they're holding rancor, and they haven't been able to release the pain. And I think what they haven't understood, because we have the English saying forgive and forget, I don't think that's correct. And I think that's why some people, like in the case of the Holocaust, would hold that kind of anger, because they think forgiveness means forgetting. It doesn't mean forgetting. We need to remember. Yeah, we need to remember so that we don't do it again. Yeah. In the case of personal relationships, if somebody harms us, we need to release our anger, but we also remember that the person did that, so we adjust to some extent the way in which we trust them until we see that they have a change in behavior. Then we readjust and trust them more. Okay? When I was in Israel one time, during the High Holy Days, it was incredible, doing Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is the day of repentance, the holiest day in the year. And so I was leading a retreat at that time. Everybody in the retreat is Jewish. And the Holocaust is very much alive in Israel. It is alive, and yeah. And so we did a meditation on forgiveness on Yom Kippur. And we imagined Chenrezig, because everybody knows that image of Auschwitz. I think you're Jewish or not, you have that image of the gate of Auschwitz, which in German says work makes you free. You've seen that? Everybody remember what that looks like? So you haven't? Oh, okay. Look up Auschwitz. That's probably the first thing you see. So, and that's where, they burn bodies. I mean, the crematoriums were going day and night. So we did a whole meditation of, people arriving at Auschwitz, and they were divided into groups, the ones who were going directly to the gas chambers, the one who they were keeping to work. And we imagined Chenrezig there. Yeah. We imagined the people who were going to the gas chamber, and Chenrezig was there with them. Yeah. we imagine the Nazi soldiers and the SS and the various guards going home to their family, and Chenrezig was there with them. How did they deal with their conscience? We imagine Chenrezig with the guards when they were doing their duty at the camps. Yeah, so every single aspect of what went on that we could remember, we just put Chenrezig there. And there's, and in our meditation, we imagine Chenrezig was there, Chenrezig on top of our head or in our heart, and we said Om Mani Padme Hum and filled the entire environment with Chenrezig's, with compassion. It was an extremely powerful meditation. Yeah. And I think that for the people who were there, that brought some relief. Mm-hmm.
So I've wondered, and I hear people ask a lot, how do you know if you've purified something? How do you know if you're successful? And one thing that's coming out in your talks is that you have reduced shame, maybe in relation to that specific object or even overall. And I'm wondering if you would agree with that. Yeah,
I think that could be one indication that you're purified. In the text, they usually say indications are that you dream of flying over the sun and touching the moon and seeing deities and all these kinds of things. But I think, in a more day-to-day way, we can see we're purified, if we have less anger and less hatred and less shame and less guilt, and where our mind is calmer. And also where we understand the teachings better. And the teachings, we can let the teachings go in without our mind making a whole lot of ifs, ands, and buts. Because that was a big question for me when I did my Vajrasattva retreat. How do I know if it's working? And people said, well, you'll just know, there's no way, there's no purification monitor that you can look at. And, if you've purified, 47% of your negativity accumulated over 55 million eons, but that's in beginningless time, so good luck. Yeah. So what I noticed is after the retreat, when I went back and listened to teachings, I understood more of them. There was less resistance on my part. Yeah, I could take the teachings in, I could think about them more. They made more sense to me without me having to, force myself to believe anything. It just kind of was a natural process. And then I think also you become quicker at catching your defilements. Not, catching them immediately is, we have a long way to go with that. But you can become at least a little bit quicker at catching them.
Asks, once you have purified a situation, but find that you still can't let go and it keeps returning to your mind, is that an indication that you must do more purification on it?
Yes. Yeah. And it's not just a thing of purifying once. Yeah, because in many of these cases, we have done this kind of behavior in one variety or another quite a number of times, maybe in this life, definitely in previous lives. We've had many previous lives to perfect our practice of non-virtue. Yeah? So it's not just doing Vajrasattva meditation once and then everything's gone. It's really a thing of working on our mind and transforming it. And so it happens sometimes. Yeah, you purify and then guilt and shame come back up. Or you purify and then you feel regret. That feeling of regret, again, it's good, if you purify and the purification is making you feel like, I really do not want to do that again. I have so much regret for that. I really do not want to do that. That kind of regret is very good. Sit with that. Yeah. And let it reinforce your intention to cultivate love and compassion and fortitude and forgiveness and everything like that.
With that kind of regret, I noticed in some of the mistakes I've made in the past, there's still a feeling of sadness. But I do know the difference between that and guilt. I do. But there's sadness there, and that's appropriate.
Yeah. Sometimes there's sadness because we do feel sad about our behavior and about the situation we created. Yeah. Don't make sure that sadness doesn't slip into guilt. Yeah. To make sure it doesn't slip into, I'm sad and it's all my fault. But it's just, wow, look at us human beings. We want happiness. We don't want suffering. And we act the opposite way. I do that. It's not just all the other sentient beings. I do that too. And that is a tragic, sad situation. And then that helps you have compassion. And again, reinforcing, I really don't want to do that again. And I also think it's very good to look over, when you see people in society doing extremely negative actions, think, I've done that in my past life. So instead of falling into just criticizing and hating them, look at the behavior. You can criticize the behavior without hating the person. And so you see the faults of that behavior. And then you think, I may have not have done this in this life, but I've done it in previous lives. And the seed of the potential to act that way still exists in my mind. I'm not an arhat. I'm not an Arya Bodhisattva. That seed is in my mind. So I need to be careful. Yeah. And so then you engage in the four opponent powers, thinking about the kinds of things that you could have done in previous lives that you didn't do in this life, but you could have done before, or things that you see other people doing, and and you think, I've done that in previous lives, and I don't want to do that in the future, so I'll purify what I did in previous lives. Because one of the good results that comes from purification is it helps us to cut the tendency to again do the action. And one of the results of our negative actions, there's three, or depending how you divide them, 4 results of our negative actions. One of them is the tendency to do it again, because we're creatures of habit. Yeah. So when you look and you think, well, look what somebody else is doing, and I have the same tendency to act that way in my mind, I don't want to do that. So I want to do the 4 opponent powers for whatever times in the past I have acted in that way. Okay? So, this is an excellent tool, whatever side of the spirit of the political spectrum you're on, it's an excellent tool to deal with what's happening. You see the anger in different people. You see, people fighting for access to the rabbit hole to jump down, with all their conspiracy theories. Yeah. You see people doing outrageous things. What is going on in Congress right now? What some of these Senate representatives and at least one senator want to do on the 6th, it's outrageous. It's crazy. It's destroying democracy. Okay, so you criticize that behavior, not the person, but that behavior, and then you think, in the past, I might have done that because I've been born as everything in previous lives. And, maybe I just helped to destroy a republic or democracy, or I helped to institute autocracy or a dictatorship. Yeah. Because, I do have a certain bossy streak inside. Okay, anybody here have a certain bossy streak inside? Yeah? Any of you here who you want to make your point and once you bite, you don't let go? Anybody here have issues with control? Yeah? You want to control other people? Okay, these are all the kinds of qualities, that you need to become a dictator and autocrat. Anybody here want more fame and praise and for everybody to think you're wonderful so that you can boss them around? Anybody here not have one part of their mind that really would like that? Yeah. You? You have overcome. That is the indication of being deep in the rabbit hole. Okay. So you just think, I've done that same thing and I don't want to do it again. This is the kind of behavior that I do not want to do. This life, all future lives, I don't want to do that. Okay? And so that really helps you make a strong determination, which helps you steer your mind in a good direction. Okay? So don't, you read some of the confession prayers and you go, who in the world would do that? That's crazy stuff. Yeah? That's what I used to think. I remember first time reading the Bodhisattva vows. Why is there a vow about this? Who would do that? Or you read some of the Vinaya stories, what some of the Buddha's disciples did. Oh my God. Those people, or those actions, I should say. It's like, why is there a precept about acting like this? Well, because somebody did it. Well, if somebody else did it, and they have 84 afflictions, I also have 84,000 afflictions. I also have 84,000 afflictions. So I need to be careful and I need to purify and make a strong resolve not to do that. Yeah, really, you read some of what the Buddha's disciples did. Oh my God. Isn't it? I mean, it's outrageous. Yeah, and same with the Bodhisattva precepts. Why are there those things? Because people did it. Actually, I was up at Shasta Abbey one time, and their community, like ours, developed very organically. And so, they began and people came. and people behaved in whatever sort of way, and they made all their community rules, like we have community guidelines. So I don't know, after 10 or 20 years, they decided to go over, and look again at all those guidelines that they had made from day one. And they told me that they were really shocked at what those guidelines were. And they all knew that there was that guideline because somebody had actually done the opposite. And they were saying, boy, at the beginning, it must have been really off the planet. Yeah. So, yeah, this is the way it is. Yeah, I mean, we could tell some stories of what happened here at the beginning. Yeah. There were some, and you don't even know all of them.